Here is another A-frame video, and in this one here I took one of the previous models, the larger A-frame that's a 2-story, and removed the stairway located on the inside so that I could create a solid floor on the upper level. And then I removed a couple of footings, and we still have a couple of posts, one on each side, in the lower level. And you could always do some modifications to the floor framing to get rid of those, and maybe I'll make another video on that in the future. Next up, let's take a look at the footings, kind of spread out here. And don't forget, you can pause the video, slow it down, or even speed it up. I have a few followers that like to watch my stuff at 2 times the speed, and I really don't care what you do as long as you're getting the information you need. And I will be adding a front porch. I don't even know if this is big enough to be a porch. And the footings that are going to be used for the second floor support, plus the roof framing support. And then these 4 sections right here of footings are going to be for the floor framing. Next up, let's go ahead and add the floor joist. The floor joists are going to lap along the 2 beams located on the interior. And these joists here will be attaching to the post that we're going to put in. You can always modify the layout and have the joist run next to the post. Remember, these are just examples of things you can do and not always something that's going to be approved by your local building department. And if you noticed, I installed a joist here. That's because if I didn't, I would be overspanned, or my on-center layout would be larger than 16 inches on center. And then a close-up view of our framing supports for the post above that will help to transfer the load from the floor beam above down to the ground. And the reason why I did this was to keep the floor sheathing waste to a minimum. And I don't think your building inspector would have a problem with this right here. I've done it before. And I went ahead and went a little bit longer here with these blocks, maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches on each side to provide extra support for the floor sheathing. Next up, let's go ahead and install our floor sheathing. And I'm going to pan out over here to give you an idea of where the breaks for the floor sheathing are going to be located to provide us with the minimum amount of waste. We needed to locate this joist right here. And something else you might want to do will be to attach a joist to each side of the post here, and then maybe run some blocks in between those joists to support the floor sheathing in that area. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the walls and our posts. So we got a post here, post here, post here, and then the same on the other side to support our floor beam. Next up, let's go ahead and install the floor framing, our beams along with the floor joist. And in this example here, I believe I have a 32-foot long building, 2 16-foot long beams. And you can see where it would be difficult for me to move the post to either side without creating some waste for the beam. So for example, if I move the post over, I'm going to need a longer beam over here. So instead of buying a 16-footer, I'm going to now need an 18-footer and then end up with about 18 inches of waste. And I'm not about to suggest that's the end of the world. If that's going to work for your project, then keep that in mind. I know sometimes we try to save a few dollars in the materials, but it ends up costing us more money in labor. And that could be exactly what you're dealing with here. Now you could go ahead and install the floor sheathing and then the roof rafters if you want to. However, I like to have my stairs installed before I do the floor sheathing, and if possible, before I do the floor joist. So let's go ahead and start working on our stairs. And we are going to install 4 posts here and keep the stairs about 2.5 inches away from the building, or 2.5 inches away from the face of the wall framing studs. And I will be making a separate video explaining more about the stairway construction, and I will put a link to that video when it is completed on the playlist. And I will put a link to that playlist in the video description area. So we're going to have a set of stairs here with a landing that's going to go up to another landing. Let's go ahead and put our stringers in. And we're going to have 1 extra step on the bottom, 1 less step on the top. And I could have always put another step in the landing and then used the same amount of steps for the upper and lower sections of the stairway. but this is what I came up with here. Go ahead and take a look at the bottom, and of course the framing plates will attach to the concrete with anchor bolts that will be poured into the foundation. We're going to have a post over here, and then a couple of steps going up to the landing. We do have a 2-inch difference between this floor and the finished floor, and this might be a little bit higher once we add flooring. And then it worked out where I could install some hangers here. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. And I did have to extend the upper joist so that I would have something to nail the hanger flange to. However, you could always use an inverted hanger if you wanted to. Go ahead and install our decking and our risers. And let's go ahead and take a look at the upper landing. Again, we have a 2-inch difference. However, your local building codes might require these distances to be a little shorter or a little taller. Next up, let's go ahead and add our treads. Now that we have our stairs to walk up, let's go ahead and install the floor sheathing. And the joists are laid out to minimize the waste of the floor sheathing. And this is very important. Sometimes by just moving a joist a few inches, you can save hundreds of dollars on your floor sheathing by not producing the additional waste that you don't want anyway. So take your time when laying out all of the floor framing and roof framing members. Next up, let's go ahead and install our lower roof rafters. And these rafters will sit on a framing plate and will need to be blocked. And I do have more information on this in our other video. And here's the title of that video: Lakeside A-frame style second story house with steep roof, floors, walls, and stairway, part 5. Next up, let's go ahead and put everything else together except for the roof sheathing, which will include the fascia board, the lookouts, and the front and the back wall. And we are going to need to change some of the layout in the upper wall and the lower wall in the front, because in the previous example I had a window down here just like this one, and then I had 2 windows located near the center. And you might consider installing skylights in both the upper and lower sections to get a little more light in also. And you might be required by your local building department to do that anyway. Or you might be required to install larger windows. So lighting will be another thing to consider, along with the problem we're going to have with headroom in this area here, because anyone coming up or down the stairs is probably going to hit their head eventually on the fascia board here. So we're going to need to make some modifications to that. Now, another thing I did here was installed a post on each side of the doorway to provide us with some additional structural support, because the longer wall framing studs will allow the walls to move or flex, and the post on each side of the doorway just might eliminate that from happening. So another thing to consider when dealing with extremely tall walls, along with a view of the fascia board extending into the stairway. Now let's go ahead and solve that problem by moving the fascia board over. So let's go ahead and zoom in on that. And you can always angle the fascia board if you don't like this sharp 90-degree bend there. And don't forget to install some type of a spacer board, either a 1x4 or a 2x4, something that's going to allow you to have a space or a gap in between the face of the wall framing and the backside of the fascia, so that you could install siding behind the fascia board. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that in almost every one of my video series, not in every one of the videos, but definitely in the series. So you can see here where the problem is solved. So let's go ahead and wrap this video up. Don't forget to watch the rest of the videos in the playlist to find the best design and framing ideas for your project. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out some of our other videos on YouTube. And if you can't find the videos on YouTube, make sure that you visit our website to find a complete organized list of all of the videos we've made so far.